Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Nairobi Work Program event on advancing knowledge, action through knowledge. We have a pleasure to have with us the SBSTA chair and Julio, our moderator for the event. We're just waiting for our Deputy Executive Secretary, Oveis, and apologies for the slight delay in the start of the event. Hopefully he will be here soon and we can start. Thanks.
Good afternoon, friends, colleagues. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Nairobi Work Program side event, Enhancing Adaptation Action Through Knowledge. I'm also pleased to have Mr. Oveis Sarmad, Deputy Executive Secretary from the UNFCCC, join us today for this opening segment. Before I invite Deputy Executive Secretary for his opening remarks, I would like to provide a brief overview of the context to set the scene for the event. Countries need practical, actionable knowledge to ramp up efforts to achieve the objectives of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. The Nairobi Work Programme, UNFCCC Knowledge to Action Hub for Adaptation and Resilience, can play a critical role by providing specific actionable knowledge targeted to those who implement adaptation action. The focus of the UNFCCC Knowledge to Action Hub, with its network of over 450 partner organizations, is to enhance implementation of adaptation action by closing gaps in knowledge on adaptation and resilience, in line with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. At this session, parties will take stock of the operational and institutional modalities of the Nairobi Work Programme. The stocktake will assess the performance and effectiveness of the program in responding to knowledge needs relevant to the implementation of the Paris Agreement. SBSTA 56 will also identify ways of strengthening the operational and institutional modalities of the Nairobi Work Programme to help scale up adaptation action through knowledge. SBSTA 56 provides an excellent opportunity for parties to strengthen the role of the work program that facilitates the scaling up of adaptation action in all countries. This could mean a shift from one-off interventions to strategic and sustained engagement with parties, UNFCCC constituted bodies, and NWP partners. As a result, communities and countries will be equipped with practical, actionable knowledge to scale up adaptation action and ensure that countries are moving towards a climate-resilient future. The closing of knowledge gaps will also help to inform the provision of finance, climate technology, and/or capacity-building actions for adaptation. Without further delay, I would like to invite Ovais for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Tosi, good friend and colleague of SBSTA, Chair of SBSTA, as you all know, for being here and opening this very important event, and also to Julio, also a good friend and colleague in the process, and the chief negotiator of Chile when Chile hosted the last COP, and we worked very, very closely with him. But to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates, good afternoon. Very pleased to be here and join the two colleagues here on the podium, and to welcome all of you on behalf of the Secretariat and the Executive Secretary, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, and to wish you a good session and a safe session. We have done everything we can to provide a conference venue facility as best as we could. So I wish you all the very best. Scarcely or not a single day goes by where the news doesn't bring us new headlines on climate extremes that are impacting the lives and livelihoods of millions of people around the world. Whether we are talking about life-threatening weather events, ecosystems, collapse of biodiversity, species extinction, or land desertification and degradation, they all have as their root cause human activities. Activities that reflect a continuing disconnect between humans and the ecosystems that sustain all of us. When it comes to climate crisis, it is more essential than ever for countries to scale up both their mitigation and adaptation efforts in line with the Paris Agreement and the commitments, decisions of the party, especially now with the conclusion of Glasgow Climate Pact. In the case of latter, we know from the sixth assessment report of the IPCC just how important specific, comparable, and relevant information is for the timely and practical application of adaptation information. This is precisely the Nairobi Work Programme, or NWP, as it has been known and been tasked to do. Since 2005, the NWP and its partners have been providing specific, actionable knowledge targeted to those who enact adaptation initiatives. In turn, the Secretariat facilitates connections between partners, governments, and stakeholders to provide information that helps all of them to implement adaptation strategies, particularly in developing countries. It is important work and excellent partnership, and I would like to thank all those who participate in the program's activities. Of principal concern is the disparity, as we all know, of adaptation capability that exists between developed and developing nations. As the IPCC report noted, adaptation is unequally distributed across all regions. They also noted that these gaps are partially driven by widening disparities between the estimated cost of adaptation and documented finance allocated to it, unfortunately. And that's the largest gaps exist among lower income population groups around the world. At current rates of planning and implementation, that gap, unfortunately, will only widen. We know that adaptation options often have longer implementation times. That's why longer-term planning and accelerated implementation, particularly in the next decade, is important to close this adaptation gap. In this regard, the UNEP Adaptation Gap Report found that there is an urgent need to step up climate adaptation finance, and parties at COP26 called for at least doubling finance for adaptation that we all know from 2019 to 2025. Action requires targeted information that will unlock the right adaptation options for countries, tailored to their needs and requirements. Options that will access finance, target investment, capacity, and technology. To that end, developed countries must follow through on this fundamental commitment to developing countries. And I urge you to do everything you can in your capacities and your roles to help countries scale up adaptation action and to examine how the work of NWP can be strengthened to provide relevant knowledge for action. I would like to close once again by thanking our NWP partners for the tremendously important work that you do and continue to support this process and be important stakeholders. It's in our hands to do the right thing, and SB56 this week and next week is a great opportunity leading to COP in Sharm el-Sheikh. So I wish you all the very best, and once again, thank you, all of you, and the colleagues who have organized that event and working in the background. That is very, very important. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ovais, and we know that without you working so hard in the background, none of this would be possible, so thank you so much. At this stage, I would like to invite Julio Cordano from Chile to moderate the event on my behalf, as I have other commitments, unfortunately. Thank you, Julio, for always filling in whenever I call upon you. Thank you for your service. I'd like to introduce Julio. Mr. Cordano, born in Santiago de Chile, a certain year, has been Chile's main coordinator and lead negotiator in climate change negotiations since 2018, including for the COP25 presidency. He has held reputable positions in foreign service and with the Chilean government during his career span of more than 2 decades. Since February 2021 and until April 2022, he was consular of the permanent mission of Chile to United Nations in New York. And in April 2022, just 2 months ago, he was appointed Director of Environment, Climate Change and Oceans of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Santiago. So, Julio, congratulations are in order, I guess. Over to you, Julio. And friends, colleagues, I encourage all of you to use this event as an opportunity to share your inputs and reflections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Always a pleasure to fill in and help in any way the great leadership that you are providing to the SBSTA. And thank you also very much, Ovais, for being here. And as you were rightly saying, I think we've been really partners in good achievements in this process. And I think one of the elements that really are badly needed in the process of the UNFCCC is precisely, first of all, this discussion with partners and stakeholders, you know, and having a conversation about specific things, concrete things that are happening on the ground, but at the same time, progressing that conversation in the context of adaptation. And probably what I take your words of Ace, that you know, adaptation is a few steps behind in some areas, and therefore it's so important that we get together and push for this agenda to catch up really with other elements in the negotiations and in the action at the ground level. So thank you very much, both of you. I know that you have a busy schedule, so I'll thank you very much for being here, and we will move on with the event.
Thank you, Julio.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So again, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure really to facilitate this event, and just for you to remember, this event is under the title Enhancing Adaptation Action Through Knowledge. As noted by both the SBSTA Chair and the Deputy Executive Secretary, for countries to scale up adaptation action in line with the Paris Agreement, it is essential to have practical and relevant knowledge that will unlock the right adaptation options for countries, and that will help access to finance, target investment, capacity, and technology. And this event provides an excellent opportunity for you to learn and share deeper insights about ongoing actions and long-term engagement with parties, NWP partners, and constituted bodies that fill knowledge gaps identified by parties. So these actions address gaps and needs for countries in formulating and implementing national adaptation plans, finance, capacity building, and technology. As noted by the SBSTA Chair, this event provides a space to discuss and clarify elements that can feed positively into the Nairobi Work Programme stocktake at SBSTA 56. And you may be aware, some of you may have participated in the first informal consultations that we had yesterday, that I think was a very successful first meeting, and I hope that this event will actually provide a good sort of complement to that in providing good examples on how parties should be inspired to have a good stocktake of the Nairobi Work Programme. But it's also a follow-up. There was also a follow-up event. This is a follow-up event to an informal dialogue that was convened by the SBSTA Chair in May. And that was a virtual dialogue that we had over 100 participants engaged very positively and actively, that provided inputs to the ongoing engagement and opportunities to strengthen the role of the Nairobi Work Programme in advancing actions through knowledge. And I know that we will have some quotes that will be projected in the screen, which are actually quotes that of people that took part in that event, that virtual event. And I think it would be so you will see the tone really of the discussion in that event. I have them right here in my cell phone. I can see very well-known names. Malcolm Ridout from the COP26 presidency that highlighted the importance of the adaptation agenda this year and in the years to come. Mirand Gubran from the incoming COP27 presidency from Egypt, which of course been very clear in the priority that adaptation has in the way to Sharm el-Sheikh. Patience Dempsey, the African Group of Negotiators representative, also provided important inputs to that event. EOSIS, through Eddie Vasquez from the Alliance of Small Island State, was also there, and so you can see the wide variety of inputs and reflections that we had in that event. And Pilar Bueno from Argentina, who many of you know, that was a very experienced researcher, but also a negotiator, that provided very concrete examples from Latin America and particularly around Argentina. So that was extremely well received. And Emily Goodwin from the International Union of Conservation and Nature. So you can see the wider range of parties, observers, non-governmental organizations, stakeholders, constituted bodies that came into that conversation, and I hope many of you were also part of that event. So you can see the vibrant discussion that there is around the importance of enhancing adaptation action at the ground level. So and that is precisely the spirit of this event. And the event precisely tries to portray some examples and further inputs for understanding where are the opportunities to enhance adaptation action. So the event will have two segments, and the first segment will be a panel. You may have seen in the program of the event that we have four very distinct panelists, and I will ask them to join me here in front of the audience. So can I invite Kenel Delusca? Is he here in the room? Yeah, Kenel, please. Sakhile Koketso, Alvin Chandra, and Beatriz Machado, please, if you can join me here. Hi, Kenel, how are you? Thank you. So thank you very much for joining me here. I will, as I present each of our panelists, I will go straight to some questions that into the interventions that I would like to invite you to do. So let me start with Kenel Delusca, or Delusca. I'm not so sure how to pronounce Delusca. So he's the chair of the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, the LEG. So thank you very much for being here with us. So vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystems are clearly at risk of being excluded from adaptation planning and implementation, which could exacerbate their existing vulnerability. And I think Oveis already made a reference to this, and also the SBSTA chair, about how unequal the impacts of climate change are in terms of hitting those least responsible for climate change. So it is crucially important to have the connection between the views from the least developed countries and the work that the Nairobi World Programme does, precisely to inspire action that is relevant for those that mostly need it. So can I go to you and ask you to share with us really how the Nairobi World Programme has engaged its partner to support the work of the LEG in considering vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystems, and how has this addressed knowledge gaps in LDCs in formulating and implementing NAPs? So it's an open question, really, just for you to elaborate a little bit on how the Nairobi World Programme has been relevant for the work of the LEG and for countries to implement NAPs. So, Kenel, please. And thank you for being here again.
Thank you very much, Julio. And thanks to the Nairobi Work Programme for inviting the LEG to this important event. And good afternoon, everyone. With respect to the question you asked, Julio, so I will be providing the following answers to this question. We, the LEG, are mandated by the COP to engage a wide range of organizations, including regional center networks, in executing our work. As the mandated body providing support to countries on NAPs, we interact with UN agencies and organizations and many other actors supporting the LDCs with the formulation and implementation of NAPs. The Nairobi Work Program, therefore, serves as a useful platform for us to tap on and engage different actors to support the LDCs on the many aspects of adaptation. The leg invites the Nairobi Work Program through collaboration with an NWP partner organization to indeed continue contributing to the efforts of the leg in providing technical guidance and advice on NAPs through its work plan activities and its reports. NW partners and thematic expert groups have engaged in contributing to the work of the leg in implementing NAP-related activities and supporting the LDCs. These activities have included technical support to LDCs in formulating and implementing NAPs through long-term strategic engagement with the leg. Please let me provide a concrete example how this technical support in advancing knowledge on considering vulnerable groups, community, and ecosystem in formulating and implementing NAPs. As a supplement to the UNFCCC technical guidelines for the NAP process, the leg, with input from NWP partners, prepared a paper providing guidance regarding consideration of vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystem in formulating and implementing NAPs. In 2019, a NWP technical session was held jointly with the leg at the NAP Expo, enabling parties and NW partners to share their experience and case study on metrics and indicators for assessing the progress of adaptation of vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystems. Insights are included, among others, determining whether and how adaptation intervention help vulnerable groups and communities maintain or improve their adaptive capacity or resilience. It includes also reducing vulnerability of groups, community, and ecosystem in the face of climate change, facilitating ecosystem restoration, and enhancing the capacity of vulnerable ecosystem to provide ecosystem goods and services for local community. And last but not least, it includes helping ecosystem to withstand both current and anticipated climate change impact as well as non-climatic stressors. The engagement with the leg on knowledge relevant to vulnerable groups, community, and ecosystem has enhanced knowledge about practical steps countries can take to use indicators and metrics, including those at the regional and global level, to support national effort in assessing the progress of adaptation. In addition to the joint session, the leg has consistently promoted its technical work and recommend these as a resource to LDCs. In particular, this product was very useful for LDCs as they identify entry points and key action for the vulnerable groups, community, and ecosystem. Going forward, there are several strategic areas of joint work that can respond to the needs and mandate of the leg, and I will cite some of them. Addressing elements of the gaps and needs published by the leg that relate to the process to formulate and implement NAPs. Collaboration for organizing NAP Expo and NAP Workshop to contribute to presentation and resources on science, methods, and tools, including for specific sector and teams. Collaboration for the uptake of the findings of the NWP by those formulating and implementing their NAPs. Solicitation of information from NWP partners on support to countries on NAPs to form part of the annual progress report. So, Julio, those are the some elements of answer that I could provide to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause to Kenel? Thank you very much for that intervention, Kenel. And I think, and please, I will ask all panelists to stay here as I give them the floor, because after the first round, we will have an opportunity to interact. And of course, make comments, and if you have questions, of course, that would be most welcome. So thank you again very much, Kenel, for that. Let me now turn to Sakhile Koketso. I'm sorry about the mispronunciation. She's from the CBD Secretariat and also represents the Nairobi Work Program Expert Group on Biodiversity. Sakhile is head of the Biodiversity Science, Policy and Governance Unit within the CBD Secretariat. Integrating biodiversity into adaptation strategy is a challenge for many countries, I would say for all countries. The CBD Secretariat has engaged with the Nairobi Work Program as a member of its expert group on biodiversity and climate change adaptation to advance knowledge about how forests and grassland biodiversity can strengthen countries' resilience to the effect of climate change. So, Sakhile, I would like to turn to you and ask you to share your views on the actions that the CBD Secretariat is doing and how you are supporting with other expert group members the Nairobi Work Program, and what lessons learned in enhancing adaptation action, particularly on forest and grassland biodiversity. So, Sakhile, please, you have the floor.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Julio, and good afternoon, everybody. I think, just to preface my comments, I think that a lot of times when we consider climate change and biodiversity and land degradation and desertification and grasslands and forests, we as human beings tend to think of these systems as separate systems. We tend to think of climate change and the UNFCCC process and biodiversity and the CBD process and so on and so forth. But just as the CBD Secretariat started to strengthen its collaboration with the Nairobi Work Program, I looked at that time at what was the National Adaptation Programs of Action. And a lot of the actions in those NAPAs were ecosystem-based. We didn't call them ecosystem-based. We didn't even call them forest-based or grassland-based. But there was a lot of rehabilitation of freshwater systems. There was a lot of work on, for example, enhancing the capacity of communities to their resilience, right, through nature-based actions and products. And so it took me a while through that analysis to realize that we're actually talking about the same things, we're doing the same things. It's just that we as human beings have this tendency to then provide labels which are relevant to our particular constituency. So the Nairobi Work Program, the CBD has been collaborating with the Nairobi Work Program for a long time now. I remember in 2013 in Tanzania, where we collaborated on the workshop on ecosystems. What was it? Workshop on ecosystem-based approaches for adaptation. And through the years, we've worked with the Nairobi Work Program in different ways. And in fact, Nairobi Work Program is one of the main ways in which the CBD collaborates with the UNFCCC, also through the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, which has also been a very good partner of the CBD. And so if I was just to look at what the CBD has contributed or how the CBD has engaged with the Nairobi Work Program most recently, so since 2019. CBD joined the Nairobi Work Program Expert Group on Biodiversity, which prepared, amongst others, I think, 2 products that are relevant for the CBD. So not just the Secretariat of the CBD, but the convention as a whole. And so the first one is the one that you asked me about, which is the scoping paper on knowledge gaps in integrating forests and grasslands biodiversity. This is something that we have been able to contribute to. And I'll just pause and say, under the UNFCCC, traditionally, the focus on forests has been on forests as a mitigation sector. And I think that this product that is sort of closing the loop to talk about forests not only as a mitigation or an adaptation, but also in terms of livelihoods and resilience strategies. And then beyond that, the CBD itself a few years ago produced a paper that looked at how ecosystems beyond forests, so including grasslands, can be important for climate change mitigation. But again, there was not the focus on adaptation. And so I think that this paper is a very important paper, not just for the climate change community, but for the biodiversity community. As you know, the biodiversity and climate change are interlinked, so we can use biodiversity and ecosystem services to respond to climate change, but we also need to plan for climate change. And we also need to integrate climate change in our own biodiversity strategies. And this paper actually provides a lot of input that the parties of the CBD actually need. Another knowledge product which is very strongly linked with the work of the CBD is the paper on enhancing resilience of oceans and coastal areas through collaborative partnerships. I just want to note that we are also part of the governance sub-program, which prepared a product, which is a technical brief on promoting synergies between biodiversity, climate change, and adaptation through national adaptation plans and national biodiversity strategies and action plans. I think one of the authors is here and can talk more about that. I believe this paper is linked to a paper that the CBD Secretariat prepared a few years ago on that very topic, and it's good to see that the work that we do in collaboration with the LEG and collaboration with the Nairobi Work Program is actually being found to be so useful that it is actually being updated and revised to continue to be relevant to the parties and to the stakeholders under UNFCCC. I'm trying to remember if I've responded to your question, because I said that I went in a roundabout manner, but
Yeah, please, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're referring to grassland and adaptation in the work of the CBD, but please, I don't want to.
Okay.
Please.
All right. So, so we find, particularly in the work that we're doing on supporting the CBD parties in developing guidelines, in developing norms, standards on the use of biodiversity and ecosystem services to help people to adapt to climate change. We find that the Nairobi Work Program is an excellent partner because the Nairobi Work Program's focus on impacts, vulnerability, and adaptation actually aligns very closely with the work of the CBD in that regard. And so we think as well in terms of supporting our parties to implement or to in promoting synergies between the climate change and the biodiversity work at national level. So that was the second part of our work. So we support our parties to take decisions on protecting biodiversity from climate change, the impacts of climate change, the response measures, the responses to climate change, not response measures. In this room, I can't talk about response measures, but responses to climate change, but also using climate change to adapt. So we help them with that technical information to take decisions. But we also support our parties to actually implement the decisions of our Conference of Parties. And so we find that the information and the products that come out of the Nairobi Work Program are very useful when we undertake the capacity building at national level. And so that for us, it's a very important a process that we continue to engage in. And also the recent focus of the Nairobi Work Program on biodiversity and the creation of a biodiversity expert group has allowed us also to share the scientific information that we have prepared on the role of ecosystems and biodiversity in climate change adaptation. And so the work that the Nairobi Work Program does and our collaboration with them, it helps us to respond to our mandate from our parties and to also the mandate of, and to contribute to Nairobi Work Program's mandate under the UNFCCC. So, I mean, I just want to end with a question, right? So the Nairobi Work Program produces a lot of important information. How can we provide, how do we enhance access to these knowledge products that the Nairobi Work Program is doing? Particularly because it's not the work that the knowledge product is not just useful for the climate change focal point, but also the biodiversity focal point and other at national level. So how do we make sure it gets beyond the obvious target group? Is it time for new mechanisms?
It's always challenging to end on a presentation with a question, especially such a big question as that. So thank you very much, Sakhile, and can we we express our appreciation with a round of applause for that. And thank you very much also for bringing this governance situation between two sister conventions like the UNFCCC and CBD. I think it's one of the byproducts really of the Nairobi Work Program is that has helped to bridge some of the gaps and break some of the silos that exist in the UN system that shouldn't exist really, because I was speaking as a country representative. I mean the climate change in my country, it's no different, or the biodiversity affected by climate change in my country is not different from the biodiversity affected, by loss of biodiversity or nature loss. So it's really conventions that should get closer together to really assist parties in attending their own needs. So thank you very much, Sakhile, for that, and thank you also for bringing us concrete examples of how the CBD is providing elements to close the knowledge gap. And you mentioned oceans. We will hear a little bit more about oceans later on from Beatriz. But before that, let me go to Alvin Chandra, that was also present in the event that we had virtually a few weeks ago. So Alvin, it's from the United Nations Environment Program, also called UNEP. Alvin is a global coordinator, adaptation policy and partnerships, climate change adaptation unit at UNEP. So Alvin, I will ask directly a question. Could you share with us the progress and lessons learned in North Africa, the Gulf Cooperation Council and Pacific seats on how this sub-regional initiative has enhanced climate adaptation action through knowledge? I'm referring to the specific initiatives that you have been developing in that sub-region, and then particularly, the connection that has as a knowledge partner with the Nairobi Work Program. So, Alvin, please, you have the floor.
Thanks, Julio, for that warm introduction. Always, the Deputy Executive Secretary had opened up with a very bold statement from UNEP GAP report, which is adaptation finance. It's not flowing to a scale which is needed. And if you look at the scale of adaptation finance that is actually required, this could be somewhere between a range of 140 to 300 billion by 2050. 2030, and in the upper range of 500 billion by 2050. And this is, this basically findings from UNEP's adaptation gap report. Important to the element of mobilizing adaptation finance is the issue of partnerships, knowledge, and also capacity through partnerships that is able to deliver on adaptation finance, particularly in LDCs and SIDS, where there's a huge challenge of implementation. This has been a key focus of the UN Environment Programme with boots on the ground. Our focus has been to mobilize knowledge, resources, and adaptive capacity with the Nairobi Work Programme alongside supporting member states on adaptation initiatives. Over the last couple of years, 7 priority workshops have been undertaken. This has covered over 50 countries, at least 11 SIDS have been covered, and about 13 African countries. These workshops have been quite important in terms of not only identifying knowledge gaps, but they have also been quite useful in terms of linking to decision-making processes. So Kenel, LDC Chair, had mentioned the importance of linking knowledge to national adaptation planning processes. Just as an example, UNEP is supporting over 20 countries with NEPs, and what has come out of these priority workshops have been quite useful in terms of feeding these knowledge gaps and priority areas into sectoral risk assessment and sectoral planning processes. And I believe this has also been a useful tool for other partner organizations to actually link in the process. Coming to the question of very concrete examples from the Pacific SIDS and also from the North Africa and the Gulf Cooperation Council subregion. One of the key functions of the Nairobi Work Programme is supporting implementation of adaptation actions by providing knowledge and also engaging stakeholders. What these workshops and partnerships have done, it has opened a door for non-state actors to actually work on adaptation action, and particularly non-state actors in terms of linking and identifying knowledge gaps in the region. So in the context of Pacific Small Island and Developing States, the priority workshop is leading to ongoing collaboration with academic partners, with universities in the context of UN Climate Change Universities Partnership Program. This has helped to close knowledge gaps and identify follow-on projects, for example, in terms of accessing climate knowledge in the area of early warning systems. This is one concrete example. So this has paved a pathway for non-state actors to actually work through NWP partners, but also with national partners as well. Another example is that sub-regional partnerships have actually helped address adaptation-related gaps. So phase 2 of the North Africa and Gulf Cooperation sub-regions they have convened. This is one of the most advanced regions in terms of phase 2 of the Lima Adaptation Knowledge Initiative. Partners have been able to take stock of progress where they are in terms of addressing knowledge gaps, but also identify and link this to targeted knowledge users. Just as an example, in Jordan, they're developing a mobile application for communicating climate-specific knowledge to farmers. This is work again in progress. In United Arab Emirates, they're scaling up studies on mangrove carbon sequestration. And just going back to the Jordan example, we actually piggybacking on this, the knowledge gaps that have been identified to develop a adaptation project to be funded through the Green Climate Fund. So, that's just concrete example of scaling up and moving away from just identifying knowledge gaps to addressing adaptation gaps. One of the key functions of the NWP is to disseminate knowledge in relation to adaptation practices in terms of climate risks and tools. I feel that this objective of the NWP has been realized through joint action pledges of partner organizations. Just as an example, I mentioned UNEP supporting national adaptation plans. We've made efforts and strides to actually link these adaptation gaps to national adaptation planning processes where we are supporting these initiatives. It's fairly early to kind of say whether these knowledge gaps have been addressed. NEPs are still in formulation in many of these countries, and the processes are still going on. Just to conclude and end over here, UNEP has, we are quite proud partners with the UNFCCC on the Lima Adaptation Knowledge Initiative. This was a joint pledge between the two organizations, and we've remained committed to this. We also are happy to share our experiences and lesson with other participants. At the same time, happy to continue this partnership. Thank you. Thank you, Julio.
Thank you very much, Alvin. So thank you very much, and thank you for that contribution. I think so far, we've been able to hear very concrete examples of how the Nairobi Work Program is working with its partners, and thank you particularly for bringing the attention to the LACI, to the Lima Adaptation Knowledge Initiative, that is one of the examples of how the Nairobi Work Program has tried to be relevant to the specific situations in sub-regions and at the national level as well. And thank you for providing some of the examples of specific actions at the national level. I would also like to say that in the first round of informal consultations that we had yesterday, many parties were saying, we not only think that the LACI is a good initiative, but also we want more of that, and we want more spread out in the different regions. So I think it's a very clear indication of the usefulness of that initiative, and clearly an encouragement to continue down that road. So thank you very much again, Alvin, for that. So let me now go to our last panelist, Beatriz Machado Graziera, she's an international climate policy advisor of Nature Conservancy, and also representing the Nairobi Work Program expert group on oceans. I think we already have heard a little bit about ocean from Sakhile, but Beatrice is from the specific group of experts on that topic. I remember that the Nairobi Work Program Focal Point Forum had a meeting recently on oceans, and there was a document that was published on the main outcomes of that discussion. So I invite you also to look at it, but in the meantime, I would like to give the floor to Beatriz. And just to underline that the awareness of the role of biodiversity in ocean in enhancing resilience is growing, and I can testify about that. That's our own initiative in COP25 was precisely on oceans, and I think we have managed to make some progress on that, and in fact we will have later on in this session a dialogue on ocean and climate, so I hope that you will also be there to hear the interventions. But the gaps in knowledge exist still, and I'm sure Beatrice will refer to this, including access to finance, and these constitute a barrier for countries to take the necessary adaptation action in oceans. So Beatrice, I would like to turn then to you as our last speaker before I give the floor to the participants in the room to share how the Nairobi Work Program Experts Group on Ocean is helping to address this knowledge need, the knowledge gaps of parties to further enhance implementation of coastal and marine nature-based solutions. So Beatrice, over to you.
Thank you, Julio, and thanks so much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to be here today. So just building on your point on oceans, starting to be more integrated into mitigation and adaptation. We've been seeing also in the past years ocean taking a more prominent role within the UNFCCC and slowly being integrated into the UNFCCC official processes, very much in recognition of its potential for mitigation, adaptation, but also food security, livelihoods, and human health as well. And touching on Sakhile's point just a few minutes ago, when you mentioned that forests have been taking mainly for its mitigation potential, I think with forests we had a similar process. It took a long time for forests to be recognized into the UNFCCC. And I heard the other day something interesting, that maybe oceans is now where forests were 15 years ago. So that was an interesting comparison. And now we are seeing, as you mentioned, we have a recurring ocean climate dialogue. We're going to have a session next week. We have the Standing Committee of Finance with the Nature-Based Solutions Forum, and we heard a lot of conversations on blue carbon and oceans. We even have a mention on blue carbon in the Article 6.8 on non-market approaches, as blue carbon as a potential new area for a non-market approach. So we've been seeing a lot of different initiatives under the convention that are bringing oceans. So it's quite valuable in this context that we have an ocean expert group in the Nairobi working program that is coming together, bringing very different views and perspectives to address knowledge gaps on adaptation. And I also want to bring a very concrete example of the engagement of the Ocean Climate Group in responding to the parties' need. So in 2020, we developed an app supplement that was developed by the Ocean Expert Group, but also with inputs from the Green Climate Fund and the LAC, the Least Developed Countries Expert Group. And it focused on very concrete considerations parties should take when developing proposals for the Green Climate Fund on nature-based solutions and coastal adaptation. So it addresses directly the fact that enhancing finance is critically relevant in the context of implementing the Paris Agreement. And also, since Kenel is here as the LAG chair, I would like to highlight also the very rich collaboration that we had with LAG in the development of the NEP technical supplement. And I think the reason I'm bringing this is because I think it served as a very good example for future collaboration opportunities. And of course, the LAG represents over 25 institutions working in different countries, in different regions. So it was very valuable when we were developing the technical supplement, both to hear directly from the LAG on what are the needs, but also to be able to be involved in sharing the outcomes and ongoing support. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice, and I think you were rightly saying you were right by saying that the ocean is one of the untapped probably areas of climate action, and I like your comparison with forest. I think it's. I think a friend of mine was telling me the blue is the new red. So I think it's that could work as an example of where the discussion is going. But increasingly, financial institutions are coming into the fore to try to identify initiatives that can be funded for the ocean in particular. And I know, for example, the Green Climate Fund is trying to develop instruments to precisely to do that, taking into account that the knowledge gaps still exist. So, okay, so thank you very much again to the four panelists. I think it was extremely rich exchange, and thank you very much also to be very concrete about the examples and the way things have been managed in between the Nairobi Work Program and its partners. But now I would like to open the floor to participants. I think the Nairobi Work Program is all about collaboration, it's about dialogue, it's about finding ways to address the needs of developing parties. So I would like to open up the floor, and I believe that we have some questions prepared for this section, but basically what we would like to do is to invite anyone that have a comment, basically, or questions that would like to share, to raise your hand and take the floor. But the idea is to really go deeper into understanding what the engagement, how could the engagement of countries under the NWP can be strengthened to scale up adaptation action, and how's the role of the Nairobi Work Program in serving that purpose. We are in the middle of a session where we are taking stock of the Nairobi Work Program. So please don't be shy, be bold, bring your ideas, so I open the floor to anyone that would like to break the ice. And I can see there are a couple of volunteers. So please, if you can introduce yourself also in name and affiliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio. Angus Mackay from UNITAR. We're based in Geneva, and we focus on training, and we host something called UNCC Learn, UN Climate Change Learn. And we have about nearly 1 million users now that use our platform, and we train something like 100,000 people per year, all for free, and all with the support of people in the room and actors in this space. I liked your question, Sakhile, to us, and I'd like to sort of not respond to it really, but put a question back to you, because you asked about the issue of knowledge and how can we make sure that knowledge that is retained within the Nairobi Work Program can be shared more accurate, more than it is. And I think my question back to all of us is, the implicit, but under that question, I think, is levels of climate change literacy, because it's very difficult to absorb the sorts of products that are coming out of the Nairobi Work Program unless you have that basic understanding of the issues. So the question, and it's implicit in those that you put up on the screen, Julio, is how can we strengthen and build climate change literacy in all of its forms, and we understand it in a very different way to the way in which we perhaps understood it 5 or 10 years ago. What is the mechanism for doing that? Because I really feel that the reason we have difficulty with policy implementation, particularly cross-cutting, is because we have too narrow base of understanding of these complex issues. So my question is, how do we build climate change literacy? I think it could be a major driver of many of the things that we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to check whether that was audible in the back of the room, because yeah? Okay, good, great, excellent. So I think you have another question here in the front. But anyway, well, okay. We will go to you after this. Please, the person with the microphone.
Do I speak or someone else at the front? I have a mic.
No. No, please go ahead. Go ahead, and we will come back to the front.
Thank you. So, Wasita, I have 2 hats on, part of the government delegation for Sri Lanka, but I also play a role in the expert committee on oceans with the NWP. So coming to both questions, I'll probably answer both. So one thing I think, how can the engagement be strengthened? I feel that there needs to be more engagement happening on a continuous basis, so that the gaps and needs of parties are identified. This could be webinars, this could be a communication process, but it needs to be assessed and identified, so that people know that there's Nairobi Work Program to start with, and what actually happens under that Nairobi Work Program. And then how can this be strengthened? One is, again, reaching out to other parties in the sense of multi-stakeholder engagement that generate evidence, knowledge, products, and linking with the gaps that have been identified, so that there could be effective communication between parties and the entities that generate these resources. I'm not saying this is not happening. There's a lot of active engagement happening, but that direction towards the website might not be just sufficient, but a bit more active engagement with the parties, identifying the needs, clustering what might be the higher priorities, and linking up with the thematic focuses that we have. I think this has been highlighted about certain geographical regions being a bit less represented, so looking at these aspects as well. So it's important to identify the gaps, identify the resources needs, existing resources that are out there, not necessarily from parties, but other entities, and maybe making that link where we could contribute. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for that. And I think it's very much connected. Can we have the microphone in front here, please? Oh, you have already. Okay, please, go ahead.
Great, it's on now. Thanks, Julio. I'm Jeffrey Chi from the International Institute for Sustainable Development. I'm one of the co-authors of the paper that Sakhile has mentioned on the synergies between NAPs and NBSAPs. So just want to provide a few comments on that paper as a concrete example of how NWP is strengthening and scale up adaptation actions by addressing some of the gaps identified by parties in the context of the first guiding question here. So as partners, we definitely feel NWP has been a very important mechanism to gather together to convene a partnership and to address some of the urgent questions and capacity gaps that parties have expressed. So this new NAP NBSAP technical paper is being co-produced by IISD, my colleagues from GIZ, UNEP, Stockholm Resilience Center, in collaboration with the Nairobi Work Program and the CBD. So a bit of context of this is that there's a scoping paper on biodiversity and adaptation from January last year produced by the NWP that presented a clear gap related to governance and multiple scales with a complex web of stakeholders operating across different regions, across levels, and across different sectors, and even across convention obligations, specifically the UNFCCC as well as the Convention on Biological Diversity. So most countries are still in the process of preparing their national adaptation plans, while at the same time, countries are likely to revise or update their national biodiversity strategy and action plans, or NBSAPs, under the convention in the future. So it provides a pivotal opportunity for national policymakers to consider how to better coordinate their efforts between these two important instruments at the national level so they become mutually reinforcing. And the NWP saw this as a very clear opportunity to leverage the two processes and integrate adaptation and biodiversity planning and action, recognizing that the starting point for doing so may not be entirely clear to a lot of developing country parties. So in an effort to strengthen and scaling up adaptation ambition and also biodiversity ambition, we collaborated and produced this technical paper that explores and identifies some entry points of synergies between adaptation under UNFCCC and biodiversity under CBD at the national level. So we built our analysis of these entry points based on existing guidance and good practice examples, specifically from Peru, Eswatini, Fiji, and Rwanda, who has actively linked their biodiversity and adaptation policy processes at the national level. So we can extract some overarching lessons learned and good practices in the hopes that it can inform parties in applying these lessons learned and in their revision of or updates of their NAP and NBSAPs in the future. So this paper is expected to be released at the end of summer this year, and we're really looking forward to delivering it to parties and the partners of NWP to be able to enhance and scale up adaptation actions and achieving that synergy with biodiversity as well. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that. That's precisely one of the objectives of building bridges, you know, and making sure that there's an impact on the ground and beyond the silos, beyond the institutional difficulties that Sakhile was referring to. So thank you very much, and we really look forward to project those conclusions into the work of the Nairobi Work Program. So thank you very much. There's another intervention. So I would suggest, because I would like to give the floor back to the panelists, give them a couple of minutes just to react. But so let's take a few interventions here, and then we will go back to the panel, please.
Thank you very much. Is it on? It's on, right? It's difficult to hear yourself. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, panel, for very interesting interventions. My name is Julio. I represent the International Union for Conservation of Nature, also a very long-standing partner of the Nairobi Work Program, and we are always very pleased to engage in this very collaborative and knowledge-to-action platform. We're mainly engaged through the expert working groups, those that have been mentioned quite broadly here, the one on oceans and the one on biodiversity and climate change. And we also encourage the creation of additional working groups such as the one on climate and agriculture. In particular, we're very appreciative of the Nairobi working program enhancing the knowledge and awareness on the nature-based solutions in particular. And we encourage more of this collaboration through the expert working groups. My comments will later on be more to the second question, but first I would like to give an example of the collaboration that has been undertaken with the Nairobi working program by IUCN, FIBA network, which is Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, as well as the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee. And through the collaboration of these initiatives, a number of event series has taken place and a policy brief has been developed that will actually be launched later in this conference next week. And this collaboration has addressed the main challenges and opportunities for integrating technology, nature-based solutions to build the resilience of oceans and coastal ecosystem and communities. So this is an illustrative of the kind of cross-sectoral and interactive collaboration that is undertaken through the Nairobi Work Program. In IUCN, we also support the creation of new thematic working group on integrated adaptation solution. We're very much in favor of that, and that group would bring together diverse stakeholders across different networks and communities of practice and would be exploring synergies between the needs for climate action, biodiversity protection, technology transfer, and financial mobilization through integrated adaptation solution. And moving forward, and more to the point of the second question, we would like to recommend that the Nairobi Work Program utilizes the expertise of the working group to better support parties with strengthened provision of knowledge, evidence, and guidance, as well as best practices for developing and implementation of nature-based solutions for resilience in different contexts. For example, this could include providing guidance on the implementation of social and environmental safeguards to avoid maladaptation, as well as ensuring the inclusion of diverse knowledge platforms. So IUCN, together with Nairobi Working Program expert groups, is prepared to support the demands and needs of the parties in this regard. Last but not least, IUCN very much supports the SBSTA's invitation to continue to strive for balanced representation of experts from all regions in the thematic expert groups, and to provide guidance to help all the parties, in particular those from developing countries, to identify sources of support, including financial, technological, and capacity building. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. Shella Bialis, co-chair of the Adaptation Committee, so I'll be speaking on behalf of the Adaptation Committee. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that the Adaptation Committee has already communicated directly with the Nairobi Work Program that are relevant for this discussion, and then pose a question based on that. So Nairobi Work Program partners have supported the AC in its work areas through technical inputs at expert meetings, webinars, outreach events, as well as responding to calls for submissions of views, experiences, methodologies, and case studies. And we're always fortunate to have Nairobi Work Program partners attend AC meetings on a regular basis and provide their perspectives on our work products, including those related to the implementation of the Paris Agreement. In addition, the AC relies on the Adaptation Knowledge Portal for our technical work, and we hope it will be further improved, and I think we've made a lot of recommendations around that. And we're also appreciative of the newsletters and adaptation exchange on Twitter, which regularly feature our events and new products. In our direct communication with the Nairobi Work Program, in line with our mandate to provide advice, the AC addressed the question of how the long-term engagement between the constituted bodies and the NWP can be strengthened in a way that could address the needs of the parties in a more strategic manner. The AC agreed that some alignment of the NWP's thematic work with the AC's overarching work areas could form the basis of our strategic long-term engagement, given these themes regularly feature on our agenda. One specific recommendation from our recent discussions is to encourage the formation of communities of practice among NWP partners, which might support the work of the AC and other constituted bodies in their thematic work. In the NWP context, these could be ongoing groups of practitioners that would be able to share knowledge and expertise and could be responsive to knowledge needs in their field of expertise. So I wanted to turn this into a question, given we have practitioners and outside experts. How might the formation of communities of practice support the long-term and strategic engagement of the NWP in the work of the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement? And what has your experience with communities of practice been, and do you see a role for this model in the NWP? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we have one last intervention. Two more, and we will close it there just to give the chance for the panelists to react. One in the back and one in the front. Let's go for the back first.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Dennis. I work for Like and Trust. We are a non-profit think tank, and we are happy to have contributed to some of the recent reports and supplements also of the Nairobi work program. And I just wanted to, so community of practice, I think, is a very interesting idea, and I think there's a lot of value in exchanging the evidence that's generated and the knowledge that is being gathered. So we are working on different thematic areas, and I think we would be happy to join a community of practice and exchange innovative solutions that can be found that bring really together the human aspect, the ecosystem aspect, technology, and all the traditional and local knowledge that is there. So for example, on agroforestry, we have created knowledge products that brings these aspects together, and same for coastal ecosystems and resilience building in relation to mangroves and seagrass and other coastal ecosystems, and to food systems. I think the creation of knowledge products and strengthening the evidence base that is there would be one answer to the second question. That can be a role of the NWP to further strengthen the exchange of knowledge that is there, and community of practice, I think, should be or could be one of the elements to really enhance that and accelerate and bring together experts. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. So let me go now here at the other intervention. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Uta Schuchmann. I'm working on ocean governance and follow the ocean agenda here in the UNFCCC as part of the Women and Gender networks, as well as across other UN systems. We have the international 2022 at the International Year of Small-Scale Fisheries. We heard about vulnerable groups, and the interrelation to climate change and small-scale fisheries in general and small-scale fisheries in particular is obvious. I would like to ask you all, or whoever is willing to answer, how can we strengthen small-scale fisheries under the work on adaptation, and in particular the Nairobi work program, while taking into account the special role, rights, and also the local governance structures of women leading small-scale fisheries? And this is my first question. And my second question also relates to the ocean. The Article 4 of the Convention is not only restricted to coastal areas, but also to the ocean as a whole. And climate change is also affecting the high seas and the deep sea. And so with regard to small-scale fisheries, I think we have a knowledge gap, yes, but it's rather a gap of representation and recognition under the UNFCCC. I think this is there. We need some action. With regard to the deep sea, we have a knowledge gap, but this must not delay action. And we have a lot of pressures in the deep sea and the ocean as a whole. And existing pressures and news are about to come. And while the ocean and the deep sea has a lot of very important and critical climate functions and other services that are vital to life on this planet, and what can be done to prevent further damage, prevent further stresses, especially namely deep sea mining, commercial deep sea mining, and but others and reduce existing ones that such as pollution and overexploitation. That the ocean can fulfill its role for life on this planet, and that we can build resilience, what can be done under the UNFCCC, under what can be especially done with regard to adaptation in the deep sea, and what is the role of the Nairobi work program on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have only 5 minutes left for the event, so, and I really like to give at least 1 minute to each of the participants, so I would encourage you to be as brief as you can.
As brief as possible. So, Erifran Vasquez from Dominican Republic, also coordinating adaptation for AOCs. I think that trying to address the question number 1 and also the question made by the CBD representative on the table, I think that the NWP survey report gave us a good guidance on where to address the gaps that we currently gaps regarding knowledge. And I think that regarding the good practice that was mentioned by Alvin from the UNEP regarding the LACI initiative, taking all the knowledge to the sub-regional needs, give us a really good example on how we could keep strengthening this engagement. So I think that communities of knowledge community for real practitioners, adaptation practitioners, could serve really well as a tool in order to keep enhancing NWP program into the real places where adaptation is really needed.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, and please make sure that we have a connection between this discussion and the discussion that we have then in the room when we do the informal consultations, because many good ideas have been brought to the table, and I want to just to mention some of them. You know, breaking the silos, increasing the climate literacy, nature-based solutions. You know, what do we do to increase the ability to implement NAPs? Community-based adaptation. Well, of course, the ocean has been mentioned by many of you. The institutional integration with constituted bodies, and the good examples that were brought from the Adaptation Committee. Communities of practice. I think it's a very interesting idea. It's a very interesting, proposal in the context of the Nairobi Work Program Partners Organization that can be also associated in communities of practice to pinpoint really the needs of knowledge gaps in developing countries, but also specific questions like what do we do with things like the small scale fisheries? What do we do about the bottom of the ocean, and especially also how do we integrate a view with the gender perspective? And I would add also indigenous people's knowledge. I think it's been in the sort of in the margins of the conversation, but it's very, very relevant. So more than providing final answers here from the panel, because in 1 minute is very difficult, but I would like to portray really the richness of what we have at hand, and the richness of what the Nairobi Work Program can actually deliver on. And it really depends on partners. It really depends on this association. So, I don't expect to have complete answers, but I would like to give the floor to our panelists to react to some of these issues. Let me start with Kenel. Just in 1 minute, Kenel, maybe if we can have your reactions to the questions and the comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julio. And of course, I think those are very important questions. But I think we definitely need to strengthen some work modalities like the community of practice. So I think this is one work modality that need to be strengthened in order to reach out to more countries and more stakeholders. And also, I think we definitely need to try to see how we can increase the training within our universities, and also have some curricula that address those aspects within the schools, just to have more climate literate people so they can better understand the knowledge product. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kenel. So, Sakhile, over to you.
Thank you. In my response to your response to me, I think that at some point the information that is produced by the Nairobi Work Programme and other partners of it, I think we need to translate the information to make it useful to the small-scale fisheries, to the agricultural, small-scale agriculture. What does it mean? I'll give you an example. Very early in my career, when we were developing our country's national biodiversity strategy, the inland fishery community, they were worried because the weatherman was telling them that there would be no rain this season, and they thought that there's a guy at the capital who has a switch, and he's turning the weather on and off, right? And so that is the interpretation of the way technical information was being provided to them. Whereas if we had translated that information into the context that was relevant to them, that they understood, that could have been a way to help them to adapt. So that is my thing, and I completely support communities of practice. We've seen that with ecosystem-based adaptation / nature-based solutions.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry to rush you because we are already out of time. But Alvin, please.
Yeah, in terms of how AC responds on a suggestion on having communities of practice, I think the big demand out there now is to support adaptation actions in country. One of the things we're learning very quickly in terms of mobilizing resources from global funds is how challenging it is for countries to access these funds. If the communities of practice can actually help mobilize and support and link this information to on-ground adaptation actions, the COP could really work in a fantastic way. I also have the pleasure of leading the Global Adaptation Network at UNEP. We have regional nodes and sub-regional nodes where we work with faith-based organizations and non-state partners. If we can also match the priority adaptation gaps with the actions they're taking, I think that would be a fantastic way. In terms of response from Dominica and my colleague, I think one of the big things now is linking these knowledge gaps to target users. We have fantastic example how climate information and services are being translated from information to knowledge to specific target groups like farmers, Met offices, etc. within GEF and GCF programs. It's a fantastic way in terms of linking that knowledge into something that's more practical, tangible, and useful. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alvin. Last but not least, Beatrice.
Thank you, and I'm going to be very brief. So I'm addressing some of the questions and comments that I heard from the floor. I think the Nairobi Working Program and the Ocean Expert Group can concretely play a key role in better integrating oceans within the UNFCCC, but also to other international discussions like the high seas and the CBD as well. And I think another point that is important to take into consideration is that the Paris rulebook was finalized last year at COP26, and now we are transitioning to a phase from design of the Paris Agreement to implementation of the Paris Agreement. And in that sense, constituent bodies and working groups like the Nairobi Working Program have a key role to play in that implementation. I was taking a look at the numbers, and in 2000 there were 8 constituent bodies part of the UNFCCC, and now there are around 30 constituent bodies designed to address finance, capacity building, and gender issues. So my message would be strengthening the links between the existing structure that the UNFCCC provides and linking it to areas outside of the convention. That's a key point for the Nairobi Working Program. Thank you.
Indeed, and I think just expressing precisely that idea of reaching out, going beyond what is possible only under the UNFCCC, precisely what it is all about, trying to reach to the concrete terms of what parties actually need in terms of adaptation gaps is precisely the Nairobi Work Programme's role and its leitmotif. So thank you very much again to all the panelists. Thank you for staying, for participating, for making excellent questions and contributions. And we'll see each other very soon. This is a session that will have adaptation at its core, and hopefully we will keep on working on communities of practice, on partnering activities. So thank you very much again, and I think we all deserve a round of applause.
There are the same settings on both. We can compare. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay.